Hey everybody, it's time for another Rules Run Through with Ryan, and today we've got Weirdwood Manor. Ryan, show us how it's done.
Thanks, Rahdo. The Beatles are about to take a magical mystery tour of your foot. Hi, it's Ryan from Knights Around a Table. Here's how you play Weirdwood Manor. You and your friends are talented wardens who have been summoned by Lady Weirdwood to help her defend her circular house against some creepy magical monsters. This is Lady Weirdwood, the woman with a snake for a belt. Her manor home bridges the gap between our world and the world of the supernatural fae. And one of those scary fae monsters has crossed the verge into the mansion. You and your friends play one of 6 differently skilled wardens who have been called to the house to best the beast. You'll traverse the rooms of the manor, collecting resources and spending them to power up your character, recruiting powerful companions and stomping on clockwork scarabs in order to rescue Lady Weirdwood and battle the big bad. As you play action cards, you'll advance time along these circular rings, which makes the monster stronger and changes the labyrinthine hallways of the manor. The game is a race to defeat the monster before time runs out. Each monster plays a little differently and has different lose conditions, but they all have one thing in common. Once you defeat that monster, all players win the game. No matter which warden you play, you'll have a player board with some unique special abilities, 3 hit points, and a cube each on your power, battle, and tactics tracks. Most characters start with a blue cube here, indicating they get to roll 1 balanced blue die in battle. You have a deck of 13 action cards that let you do different things. You always begin the game with this one in your hand and 2 more drawn randomly from your deck. Your character standee starts at the manor entrance. I'll be teaching the game with the Chaos Ogre as our starring monster. He starts on the outer ring of the manor opposite the entrance. Lady Weirdwood is trapped here in the throne room in the middle of the manor, besieged by these clockwork scarabs. There are a few more scarabs peppered throughout the place that we'll need to defeat. Oh, by the way, these lovely sculpted scarabs, the acrylic standees, and the wooden resource tokens are all components of the deluxe version of Weirdwood Manor. The retail version will have cardboard components in their place. Time management. On your turn, you'll choose one of the cards in your hand and play it to one of these slots at the top of your board. You don't have to go left to right in order. You can play your first card over here if you want to. But there's a time penalty to playing a card. The inner time of day ring has morning, afternoon, evening, and night sections on it, with 3 segments each. Whenever you play a card, you have to turn this ring counterclockwise, following the direction of the arrow, at least 1 segment, and you always have to advance it to a segment matching the time of day where you played your card. So if the ring was on this first morning segment, and you played a card to the morning slot above your board, you'd have to advance it to this morning segment or this morning segment. It's your choice. If the ring was here on evening and you played a card to your nighttime slot, you'd have to advance the ring to the first, second, or third nighttime segment. But if the ring was here on the last afternoon segment and you played a card to your afternoon section, you'd have to spin the ring all the way around to afternoon again and stop on one of the 3 afternoon segments. Anytime you go a full cycle and this icon on the ring spins past this hourglass icon, the day has ended and you have to advance the outer ring to the next day. You've only got until the end of the 12th day to defeat the monster, so you need to be careful about time management. There are certain situations that let you reverse time too. In that case, if you ever have to reverse from morning to nighttime on the inner ring, you'll turn the outer day ring to subtract a day from the clock. Your turn. So back to those action cards that you're playing. Pick one of them from your hand, add it to a slot above your board. It's 1 card per slot. And then, after you advance time, you do any or all of the things on the card in any order you like. So if you played your charge card, you could move and then attack, or attack and then move, or just attack, or just move, or do nothing. But doing nothing is an exceptionally bad idea. If a card doesn't have any actions on it that are useful to you this turn, you can play it face down as a sort of Hail Mary kind of play. Playing a card face down lets you either move, attack, or take 1 resource of your choice. The resources are these knowledge tokens, Min, which is sort of like magic power, and scarabs. Yes, the enemies you fight are also a resource you can spend. Min is correctly pronounced mean, but nobody knows what to do with an I when it's wearing this little hat, so I'm just going to call this resource Min, like you probably will. There's a fourth type of token too, called power, but it doesn't count as a resource. So whenever you see this any resource symbol, it's referring to these three things. Power is referred to specifically with its own sparkly purple icon. Some cards have resource costs on them. So if Oliver wanted to use his Savage Sketch ability, he'd need to pay 1 min and 1 scarab as he played the card, or else he couldn't take the action on the card. Whenever you have to pay a resource, the icon will be red. Par for the course for any cooperative board game, each monster has a big deck of bad junk that you have to activate at the end of your turn. Once you finish taking your mandatory main action by playing a card, you activate the monster by resolving the top card in its deck. We'll go into that a little later. Finally, to finish out your turn, you check to see if all your card slots are full. Of course, this won't happen until later in the game when you've taken at least 4 turns. If your slots are full, you perform a scarab phase, where those clockwork beetles skitter about the manor, blighting rooms. We'll see how that works shortly. Then you discard all the cards at the top of your board to your discard pile. Whether or not you perform the scarab phase, you always get to fill your hand up to match the number of health points you have at the end of your turn. So if your health is at 3, pull cards from your deck until you have 3 cards in your hand. You can draw cards during your turn in excess of your health, but if you finish your turn with more cards than you have hit points, you have to choose to discard cards until your hand matches your health. If your deck doesn't have enough cards for you to draw what you can, and then shuffle your discards to create a new draw deck. So that's your turn. Play a card, potentially paying its cost, advance the clock, do the thing on the card, activate the monster, maybe do a scarab phase and clean out your cards if it's later in the game and your slots are full, and then rejig your hand so that you only have as many cards as you have hit points. Then it's the next player's turn, going clockwise around the table. Or if you're playing solo, you get to play the next turn. Moving. To move around the manor, you need to play a card with at least one of these move symbols on it, or play a card face down to get 1 movement. The manor has 3 rings of rooms, with the throne room in the middle, and the skinny spinning time rings are like hallways between these rooms. When you move, you can move as far as you like in the manor, as long as you end up in a different room and you can somehow path your way over there. So if the manor looked like this, you could spend 1 movement to boogie across the hall to this room. If it looked like this, you could use 1 movement to truck all the way over here. That's another reason why you want to be careful about choosing how far to advance these time rings. You can easily get trapped in a room with no exit as the hallway rotates. If you bop into a room with a scarab in it, that scarab stops your movement. Same deal with the monster. And likewise, you're going to have to slow your roll if the room is on fire. You'll also take 1 damage when you enter a flaming room. If the room has been reduced to rubble, you can't even get into it, or through it. If you start your movement in a room with a scarab or the monster or rubble or man's red flower in it, you're allowed to use a move action to get out of there. Oh, and you only take fire damage moving into a room that's on fire, not out of it. If you have 2 move actions available, you could use one to go from here to here and stop in this room because the scarab is interested in biting you, and then use another move to say no thank you to the biting and keep moving on your way. That works for fire and the monster too, although the fire will take a bite out of you. Room actions. After you finish moving, if you find yourself in a room with no scarabs or monster or fire in it, you can do stuff in that room. Or if you're in a room with baddies and you defeat all those baddies to clear out the room, you can take that room's action, as long as you're standing in that room. Weirdwood Manor has a boatload of different rooms in it, and it would take a long time to go over each and every one. But generally, you've got rooms that get you stuff, like the Witching Well that gets you up to 2 min, rooms that let you trade stuff for other stuff, like the Training Yard that lets you cash in a resource for a power token and an experience point, rooms like the Glittering Cellar that let you roll a die to gamble on the outcome, rooms that let you hop or teleport to another room, and yes, once you end up in that new room you can use its action as long as it's clear of bad stuff, and even rooms with this icon, which means that they affect other players. So activate the Altar of Altruism so that another player can take a min or a knowledge token, oh the slash means or, and you get 2 experience points. Doing stuff in a room is optional, so if you went to the Cleansing Sanctuary, you could gain a hit point and banish a beetle, or do one or the other, or neither. If you teleport another player to a room and that room is empty, then yes, the teleported player can immediately take that room's actions. Forging battle dice. This special symbol means you can forge a battle die. Everyone except Wally begins the game being able to roll one balanced blue die in combat. If you avail yourself of this symbol, you can pay an escalating number of resources to forge additional battle dice to use whenever you fight. Your choices of dice to forge are blue ones, which have nothing, 2 attack symbols, 2 defense symbols, and a burst. If you roll a burst during combat, you can trigger one of your character's unique burst abilities. Black defense dice, which have a blank, 2 single defense icons, and 3 double defense icons. And red attack dice, which have the same faces as defense dice, except they have attacky swords instead of defendy shields. So when forging a battle die, you pay the cost, pick a die, and put a cube of that color in the slot. For the rest of the game, as long as those cubes are there, you'll roll those dice in battle. If you forge your final battle die, you gain 4 experience points. Companions. This symbol lets you hire a companion. Everybody but Eugene is allowed to hire companion characters because Eugene is a nerd. Your choices are here. The cost of a companion is here, and the stuff the companion does is here. The sweet thing about companions is that once you recruit them, they go to the right of your board, where they give you a new slot where you can play one of your action cards. And that slot is time-wild, so you can advance the time of day ring to any section you want when you play a card there, as long as you turn the dial at least 1 tick. Every additional companion you daisy chain beyond the first one costs you 2 additional resources. Some companions, like Matilda Ravenstone, give you a persistent ability for the rest of the game, but most companions need to be exhausted to use their power. If you see this exhaust symbol, then at any point during your turn, you can flip that companion over to fire off that ability. An exhausted companion still gets you that wild slot where you can play a card. If it's the end of your turn and all your slots are full, and you need to clear out all your cards and activate the scarabs, that's when you get to refresh any exhausted companions you have. Once you hire a companion, you fill the empty slot with a card from the deck so that there are always 4 companions to choose from. Warden Tactics. Sometimes you'll activate this symbol, which lets you draw a Warden Tactic card. You can play a Warden Tactic card at the same time you play an action card, and it covers up the top of that card to give you some special benefit, like regaining health points or doing extra damage. If you end your turn and all your slots are full, and you need to clear out your cards and activate the scarabs, you discard any Warden Tactic cards that you've played. The other nice thing about Warden Tactic cards is that they complete and match any bonus icons on neighboring action cards. Usually when you lay down a card and you complete these symbols, they act as that thing for as many turns as your cards stay out. So if you link these 2 cards, you get an extra attack icon every time you got in a fight, and that bonus icon would persist until you filled up all your slots on a future turn and had to reset your cards. Or if you matched up these symbols, you'd get a persistent knowledge discount. So you might activate the Royal Armory to forge this battle die, which costs you a min and a knowledge token, but it only costs you a min because you've got this bonus knowledge from these linked cards. A Warden Tactic card has these wild wheels on it that match any neighboring bonus symbols. Scarab Phase. When you do have to scrap all of the cards at the top of your board because your slots are full and your turn is over, you have to perform a Scarab Phase. Here's how that goes. You start at this gold-bordered room in the middle ring and go clockwise around the circle. For any room that has 1 or more scarabs in it, you move those scarabs to the room across the hall. If a scarab can't cross the hall because the way is blocked, you move the scarab clockwise down the hall until it reaches the first room with an open door. If the room a scarab is in is blocked, well, that scarab doesn't move. Then you do the same thing for the inner ring, starting at the gold-bordered room and going clockwise until you've moved all of those scarabs. Next, you put a scarab in every room of the inner ring that doesn't already have a scarab in it. And finally, if there's at least 1 scarab in the throne room, you put a new scarab in one of the throne room's empty spaces. The throne room holds a maximum of 6 scarabs. That means that if you manage to clear all of the scarabs out of the throne room, they'll never show up there again, even if one of the monster cards tells you to spawn a scarab in the same room as the monster. If scarabs move or spawn such that there are 2 or more of them in a room, that room becomes blighted. You flip the room tile over, and now you won't be able to use that room's actions. Later in the game, if you find yourself in a blighted room with no monster or scarabs in it, you can pay the cost on the blighted tile to clear the blight and flip the room back over. That'll score you some XP. And you get to use the room's action if you so choose. If you're fighting the Chaos Ogre and you have too many blighted rooms, you'll lose the game. So you'll want to keep on top of managing the scarabs so that they don't go blighting all kinds of rubes on you. Spending XP. As you do different things in the game, you'll earn experience points. You get 4 XP for forging your final battle die, 2 XP anytime you raise your hit points to max, a certain number of XP for fixing a blighted room, depending on the room, and there are all sorts of other ways to earn them. When you earn them, you spend those points immediately on the power, battle, and tactics tracks at the bottom of your player board, however you see fit. So if you gained 3 XP, you could move each cube up 1 step along each track, or move 1 cube 3 spots, or split the points up between tracks. Anytime you move a cube to a space with a prize on it, you claim that prize. Power tokens and resources up here, extra hit points and permanent attack and defense icons along here, and Warden Tactic cards or Scarab Banishment or Scarab Defeat along here. Each track has a big bonus if you manage to reach the end. Use any player power for free, damage the Fey monster for 2 points, or clear a room of blight, banishing its scarabs in the process. And you even get to use that room's ability when you're finished. We haven't talked about using those special player powers yet, but we'll get to them once we talk about the differences between the characters a little later on. Combat. If you want to fight something, either the Fey monsters or the scarabs, you generally need to be in the same room as the baddie, and you need to play an action card with at least one of these attack symbols on it, or play a card face down to attack once. Take a look at all of the attack and defense icons you inherently have. You might have some on the cards you've played, or lined up as bonus icons up here on your action cards. They might also pop up on Warden Tactics cards you've played, or on your companion cards. Or you might have unlocked some along your battle track by spending XP. Use these tokens to track those attack and defense icons along the edge of the manor. Look for any defense icons you inherently have too. Don't worry about the little prize icons along this track. Well, that's part of a gameplay variant that I'll tell you about later. It doesn't have anything to do with combat. Some of your cards or abilities may describe stuff you can do before a battle. Well, now's the time to cash in any of those perks. Next, you grab the dice you've forged. In this example, Oliver has forged his default balanced blue die plus 2 red attack dice. He grabs those dice and rolls them. Move the attack and defense symbols up according to the symbols that got rolled. Then, some of your cards or abilities may describe stuff you can do after the battle, once your dice are rolled. Now it's time to cash in those perks. Once you've resolved your before battle abilities, rolled your dice, and then resolved your after battle abilities, the baddie you're fighting gets to roll dice too. Every scarab you fight gets to roll 1 balanced blue die. If you're fighting more than 1 scarab, you fight them all at once and roll a blue die for each of them. If you're in a room with the Fey monster and 1 or more scarabs, you can't attack the monster. The scarabs protect it. You have to defeat all of the scarabs first before you or another player can fight the monster on a future turn. If you are fighting the Fey monster, it rolls dice according to how angry it is. And how angry it is depends on which day you're on. So if it's day 6, the Chaos Ogre is this much angry, and will roll 2 defense dice, 2 balance dice, and 2 attack dice. If that wasn't bad enough, the Chaos Ogre has racked up some power cards during the game, which lets it roll even more dice. For every defense icon the baddie rolls, you reduce your attacks by 1. Those attacks were blocked by the baddie. If you have any attack swords left over, you deal that amount of damage to the monster or the scarabs. Each scarab has 1 hit point, so a single undefended attack icon will take care of a single scarab. When you defeat a scarab, you either get 2 experience points, or you get 1 experience point and you get to keep the scarab as a resource you can spend on something. If you hit the Chaos Ogre, you get to choose where to remove its hit point tokens, from its head, from its torso, or from its arms. Grab any token you want. If you clear out an entire row of cubes, you suffer some sort of penalty. Well, this one makes you spawn a scarab in a random room, and this one makes you spawn a scarab in the same room as the Chaos Ogre. But if you clear all the cubes from a single section, head, torso, or arms, you deny the Chaos Ogre one of the dice he gets to roll in future battles. He loses a balance die if you fully clobber his head, a defense die if you take out his torso, and an attack die if you mar his arms. Different things happen if you or the baddie roll burst symbols on blue dice. Each player has a different burst ability. So when Oliver rolls a burst, he can roll 2 additional red, blue, or black dice after the bad guy rolls. If Bailey rolls a burst, she gets an extra attack and can heal 2 hit points. If a scarab rolls a burst, It ignores any damage you try to do to it and skitters out of the room following the Scarab phase movement rules. If the Chaos Ogre rolls a burst, it gets an extra attack icon and you spawn a Scarab in the Ogre's room. Once you're finished resolving your roll against the baddie, you tally up the damage the baddie did to you. Reduce your defense points by the number of attack symbols the baddie rolled. For any attack you can't absorb after your defense token reaches 0, you lose 1 hit point. With each hit point you lose, remember you're reducing your maximum hand size, which is really limiting. So if you don't want to lose hit points, then for every unblocked damage you absorb, you can alternatively discard 1 power token, or discard your most expensive forged battle die token. You can never lose your default blue battle die, and you can never go below 1 hit point. For every damage you need to absorb that would take you below 1 hit point, and you don't have any power tokens or battle dice you can get rid of, you just ignore that damage. To reiterate, the name of the game is reducing that monster's hit points to 0, and then everybody wins the game. So, make smart sacrifices. Do whatever it takes. Monster cards. Whenever you finish your turn, you have to activate the Fey monster. The top card of the monster's deck has an icon that hints at what the monster is up to. Start by advancing the clock according to the number of symbols on the top card. Then flip the card over to find out what the monster does. If you flip one of these cards with 3 different levels on it, you have to activate each section according to how angry the monster is, which depends on how far the game clock is advanced. So if the Chaos Ogre is minimally angry when you flip this card, you'll have to spawn a Scarab in the same room as the monster. If the Ogre was pretty cheesed off, you'd have to spawn a Scarab in his room and spawn a Scarab in a random room by rolling this die to determine which ring, outer, middle, or inner, and which numbered room the Scarab will appear in. And if the Ogre was downright miffed, you'd have to spawn a Scarab in his room, spawn a random Scarab, and then spawn another random Scarab, blighting rooms wherever 2 or more Scarabs have gathered. As the Scarabs blight rooms, this tracker moves up, and it can grant the Chaos Ogre extra dice to roll in battle. If 8 or more rooms get blighted, you lose the game. Some cards have special instructions that make the Chaos Ogre reduce rooms to rubble, attack all players in the same room, or hunt down Lady Weirdwood. If you flip one of the Ogre's attack cards while he's in the same room as Lady Weirdwood, she takes a hit. If Lady Weirdwood takes 3 hits, she dies, and you lose the game. But you can also free Lady Weirdwood from the throne room by clobbering all of the Scarabs there. Once you clear out the throne room, any player in any room can pay 1 resource on their turn to move Lady Weirdwood to any connected room in the manor. Lady Weirdwood suddenly isn't afraid of Scarabs and she can move right through them. If you fight bad guys while Lady Weirdwood is in the same room as you, she adds 2 attack points to your side. After you finish dealing with a monster card, you leave it in the discard pile, except if it has one of these power icons on it. In that case, you slot it at the top of his board according to how many angries he is. As the clock advances and the Chaos Ogre gets feistier, you slide the slotted cards up so they grow more powerful. After a battle with the Chaos Ogre, even if he kicks your butt, his power cards get discarded, and the player who fought him gets 2 experience points for every one of these discarded power cards. If you run out of monster cards to flip, shuffle the discards to create a new deck. Character powers. The good guys have powers too. Each Warden has 3 different abilities that you can activate on your turn by playing a power token and usually some other combination of resources. You can only use each power once per turn. Put the stuff on the scroll to remind yourself that you've used that power. Many powers have 2 different options on them. If you're using a power, you can only use one option or the other, not both. So, Celia spends 1 power token and a knowledge to hire a companion at a discount and gain 2 XP. Then she takes her main action, which involves exhausting her companion. Then, before her turn is over, she spends 1 power token and a knowledge token to use this power to refresh her companion and gain 2 more XP. She decides to exhaust that companion a second time. She'd like to do that all again, but she's already used the power that allows her to refresh a companion this turn. So she sends all of her spent resources back to the main supply and decides to bide her time until her next turn. In addition to having different powers, the Wardens all have different things they do when they roll a burst on the balanced die during combat, and they each pay different costs to gain additional combat dice. Each character has a few unique character-specific cards in their deck, and a few characters have even more unique abilities. Eugene is not allowed to hire companions because the right side of his board is a special transfer vault that other players can use to swap their cards in and out after paying 3 resources. The transfer vault essentially enables the wardens to trade cards with each other when usually those cards would stay within the respective character decks. All of Eugene's card slots are time-wild, so he can advance the clock as much or as little as he likes on his turn, as long as he moves it at least 1 tick as usual. Wally is not allowed to acquire combat dice like the other wardens. Instead, he powers up his Thief's Gauntlet, which allows him to steal combat dice from the enemies he's fighting. He also has a power that lets him steal power cards from the monster and slot them in his own board. I won't go over all of the stuff the different wardens and companions do, just like I won't tell you what the other 2 Fey monsters, the Minwraith and Theris, are up to, except to say that among other nasty tricks, the Minwraith can walk through walls and drain scarabs of their life force to regain health, while Theris siphons any resources or power tokens you spend to power up his spell of corruption that he plans to wallop Lady Weirdwood with. Discovering all of the different character, monster, and room abilities is a big part of the fun of playing the game. Setup. To set up the game, assemble the 2 halves of the manor. The larger daytime ring fits together like a jigsaw puzzle, and the 2 rings go here and here, starting on day 1 and the first segment of the morning. Place the outer, middle, and inner rooms randomly. Put your resources, power tokens, tracking cubes, and combat dice in piles by the board. Shuffle the companion deck and deal 4 companions face up. Place the shuffled Warden Tactic cards nearby. Put the attack and defense trackers on 0. Remember those symbols we saw along the edge of the board? Well, they support a family XP variant where instead of everyone deciding how to spend their experience points individually, you move a tracker along the edge of the board whenever anyone gains XP, and all characters power up together, earning whatever prizes you unlock as you go. Fill in the throne room with 6 scarabs. Then put 6 more scarabs in the rooms along the inner ring. Then roll the scarab dice to place 3 more scarabs in the manor. So this roll means you'd place a scarab in the outer ring in room 5. If you roll a room that already has a scarab in it, keep rolling until you get a scarab-free room. Grab your character board, your XP tracking cubes, and a cube to track your health, which starts at 3. Some characters, like Sekhmet, get some starting resources to begin the game. Every character gets a blue cube here, indicating that they'll get to roll 1 balanced blue die in combat. Except Wally, who gets a tracking cube here on his gauntlet. Put your character standee in the entrance to the manor. Grab your character deck and pull out your Shadow Steps card. Then shuffle the rest of the cards to form your draw deck. Draw 2 more cards at random to form your initial hand of 3 cards, which includes your Shadow Steps card. If you're playing Weirdwood Manor solo, it's fun to grab a couple of different wardens to play. Monster setup depends on which big bad you're fighting. For the Chaos Ogre, trap Lady Weirdwood in the throne room with those scarabs. Put the Ogre standee on the outer ring directly across from the entrance. He needs 6 cubes each on his head, torso, and arms, and a tracker each on the Blight level and Lady Weirdwood's health. Shuffle his monster deck and keep his rubble tokens handy because he's bound to do some rubbling. The Minwraith puts Lady Weirdwood in the throne room too. He starts the game next to the entrance hall in the middle ring. Put a tracking cube here on his starting health and 1 for Lady Weirdwood. Keep this special die handy. The Minwraith gets to roll it anytime he gets a burst, and it lets him either heal himself or walk through walls to a different room. Shuffle his monster deck and keep it close. To set up the Dark Mage Theris, place his standee in the throne room, while Lady Weirdwood starts on this center stage of his corruption spell. This spell is like a tug of war. Depending on how corrupted Lady Weirdwood has become, she can support either you or Theris in battle. Theris' health tracker starts here, and you track the 3 arms of his corruption spell here, here, and here. Shuffle his monster deck as usual. He's going to build those cards up along here, and then trigger them all when you try to land the final blow. Finally, put all the fire tiles nearby because Theris is a bit of a pyro. And now, you're ready to play Weirdwood Manor.
Thanks, Ryan. I think we've got it. And if you folks would like to learn a little bit more about this game, you can follow the links that are on the screen right now or down in the show notes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.